Evening. Welcome to the pre-show for this year's Peace and Progress Juneteenth. I'd like to introduce you to Griffin Johnson, a senior at Lehman High School, who will be reading for us the Emancipation Proclamation.
Whereas on the 22nd day of September, in the year of our Lord, 1862, a proclamation was issued by the President of the United States, containing, among other things, the following, to wit, that on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then, thenceforth, and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no acts or acts to repress such persons, or any of them in any efforts that may make for their actual freedom. That the executive will, on the first day of January aforesaid, by proclamation, designate the states and parts of states, if any, in which the people thereof respectively, shall then be in rebellion against the United States. And the fact that any state or the people thereof shall on that day, in good faith, represented in the Congress of the United States, be members chosen thereto at elections wherein a majority of the qualified voters of such shall have participated, shall, in the absence of strong countervailing testimony, be deemed conclusive evidence in such state, and the people thereof are not in rebellion against the United States. Now, therefore I, Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, by virtue of the power in me vested as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States, in time of actual armed rebellion against the authority and government of the United States, and as fit and necessary war measure for suppressing said rebellion, do, and on this first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, and in accordance with my purpose, so to do publicly proclaimed for the full period of 100 days. For the day first above mentioned, order and designate as the states and parts of states, wherein the people thereof respectively are this in day rebellion against the United States, the following to wit: Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia, in which accepted parts are for the present left precisely as if this proclamation were not issued. And by virtue of the power and for the purpose aforesaid, I do order and declare that all persons held as slaves within said designated states and parts of states are, and henceforward shall be free, and that the executive government of the United States, including the military, naval authorities thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of said persons. And I hereby enjoin upon the people so declared to be free to abstain from all violence, unless in necessary self-defense, and I recommend to them that, in all cases when allowed, they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. And I further declare and make known that such persons of suitable condition will be received into the armed service of the United States to garrison forts, positions, stations, and other places, and to man vessels of all sorts in said service. And upon this act, sincerely believed to be an act of justice, warranted by the Constitution upon military necessity, I invoke the considerate judgment of mankind and the gracious favor of Almighty God. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the United States to be affixed.
Welcome and good evening, Kyle community, friends, and neighbors. My name is Dr. Miguel Zuniga. I'm a City of Kyle council member, and we are here for the 4th Annual Dialogue for Peace and Progress to have a discussion and conversation about an important historical American holiday known as Juneteenth. I'd like to thank our City of Kyle for hosting this beautiful and spectacular event. I am joined here tonight by my co-moderator, Dr. Vanessa Westbrook, and I'd like to take this moment to introduce and thank all of our panelists for their participation here tonight from left to right. Nitra Davis Moore, Abigail Edge, Laura Coleman, Victoria Garcia Rosas, Nicole Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Zuniga. I am Vanessa Westbrook, and it is my pleasure to be here another year for Peace and Progress Community Dialogue with our focus around Juneteenth. Now, the theme for this year's Juneteenth 2024 is Jubilee, marking a joyous celebration of the emancipation of African Americans. The spirit of Jubilee fosters a connection, understanding, and celebration of our shared joy and enthusiasm with a lot of jubilation. Whether you call it Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, or this country's second Independence Day, Juneteenth is one of the most important anniversaries in our nation's history. Earlier, we actually had an opportunity to hear the Emancipation Proclamation being read by a senior at Lehman High School. His name was Griffin Johnson. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. On June 19, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger, who had fought for the Union Army, led a force of soldiers to Galveston, Texas, to deliver a very important message. The war was finally over, the Civil War, mind you. The Union had won, and it's now had the manpower to enforce the end of slavery. The announcement came 2 months after an effective conclusion of the Civil War, and even longer since President Abraham Lincoln had first signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. Enslaved black people in Texas and most southern states still were not free even after that date. The states and the cities had to be claimed by Union Army before slaves were freed, as the Confederate Army and the Confederacy would not recognize the Emancipation Proclamation as being valid. Juneteenth gets its name from June and 19th. The 19th, of course, is the day that Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and he bare the message of freedom for the slaves there. Upon his arrival, he read, General Granger, General Order Number 3, informing the residents that slavery would no longer be tolerated, and that all slaves were now free and would henceforth be treated as hired hands if they decided to remain on the plantation. Now, beginning in 1866, after black Texans, some former slaves and their descendants, they traveled to Galveston, Texas in honor to celebrate Juneteenth. That tradition soon spread to other states, but it was not uncommon for white people to bar black people from celebrating in public places, forcing them to get creative. A community of leaders in Houston, Texas, for instance, saved $1,000 to purchase land in 1862. That land would be devoted specifically to the Juneteenth celebration. This information came from the Houston Parks and Recreation Department. That land became known as Emancipation Park, and it is still there to this very day. Here in Hays County, African Americans celebrated a day of Jubilee at the Hays County Fairgrounds in San Marcos. This annual event took place in 1866 and lasted until 1926. The three-day weekend event, Friday through Sunday, provided a family ambiance filled with food, fun, and a Christian atmosphere to celebrate freedom. Unfortunately, the annual event was stopped in 1926 by the city officials, who were under the influence of the Hays County area Ku Klux Klan, which was one of the largest Klan organizations in Texas. The huge county celebration broke up into smaller events at black churches and on private land that was owned by African Americans, ranches, and farms. Juneteenth, or Freedom Day, is the oldest national celebrated commemoration of the end of slavery in the United States. Texas recognized Juneteenth as a state holiday in 1980. The national holiday, established in June of 2021, is considered the longest-running African-American holiday and has been called America's second Independence Day. Juneteenth, now 159 years, continues to grow in popularity across the United States and other countries such as Canada, Jamaica, Nigeria, and the United Kingdom. Enjoy your Juneteenth. It is very appropriate to say Happy Juneteenth over the next couple of weeks. So to all, I say Happy Juneteenth.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa. I'm going to start with our panelist question number one, and feel free to raise your paddle if you choose to answer. Did you know about Juneteenth growing up? Was it celebrated in your family or community?
Ms. Johnson and Ms. Coleman. Okay, Ms. Coleman, Ms. Johnson.
Okay, Ms. Nicole Johnson, you have the floor.
Hi. I knew about Juneteenth growing up because I grew up in New England, in Boston, Massachusetts, and I was in grade school from first grade till high school, a part of a voluntary school desegregation program. And it bused inner city kids from the inner city to the suburbs because the inner city schools were not as equipped educationally as the ones in the suburbs, and it gave the suburban schools the opportunity to become more diverse.
Thank you.
So, in the 90s, basically.
How about you, Ms. Laura Coleman?
I grew up knowing about Juneteenth, coming from Mississippi. However, it's kind of nuanced because we did not celebrate the way that our community, the way that we think celebrations happen now. I grew up constantly around celebrating Black people, Black emancipation, Black history, Black culture, going to museums and, as kids, because my school encouraged that. So now living in Jackson, right? Did we celebrate it with the Jackson officials, with the city of Jackson, Mississippi? No, we didn't, because it is still predominantly a very discriminatory area. However, the Black community, we celebrated on my street, on my block. It was something that we celebrated, and it was something that we celebrated all the time, not just during the month of June, but just being able, it was kind of like a camaraderie kind of thing. So yeah, it was an everyday kind of thing for us, for me.
What kind of special things did you do to celebrate Juneteenth?
We had things like barbecues. My family specifically, we would have Monopoly tournaments that would go on forever. Monopoly is the quickest way to end a relationship. And it was such a fun time because we had neighbors. My cousins used to live right down the street, and we had friends around the corner, and all the kids, we would all come and we'd have basketball tournaments, and the adults would be barbecuing, and we'd be playing jump rope, and you always had that one kid that was chasing somebody else, and it was just a very wholesome kind of environment. And it was probably one of my fondest memories because we didn't really celebrate the 4th of July as much. We saw fireworks and, Independence Day, things of that nature, but man, those barbecues, it was just something undescribable, I think.
Okay, thank you for that. Ms. Nitra Davis-Moore, you raised your paddle.
I did.
Something you'd like to share?
Yes, I grew up with, celebrating Juneteenth as well. I come from a really strong foundation of, advocates and fighters who fight the good fight and make sure to remind us to pass that down from generation to generation. And I was fortunate enough, actually growing up in Texas, south of here, near San Antonio, Converse, to have teachers that taught outside of the books, our books that were, assigned here in Texas. And so history was never something that was super important to me during school. And I don't think I started really appreciating our history until after school. And as I grew older, to see how fortunate I was to even have teachers that did not look like me, still knew the importance. And I know that often does not happen in our state. So for me, recognizing my old district, Judson ISD, it was a blessing. And I didn't know it until I got older. And I know every student doesn't have that. Anyone else?
Thank you for sharing.
All right, thank you, ladies, for sharing with us. Not sure if the audience noticed either here or at home, but we have an all-female panel this particular year to do something a little different. And I thought it was well to note that we had just now with that first question, someone from Mississippi, from Massachusetts, and from Texas. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to our second question. That question is, Juneteenth is considered by some the African American Independence Day or America's second Independence Day. What might some of the benefits be from raising awareness and understanding this observance? I'll say that again. What might some of the benefits be from raising awareness and understanding of this observance, Juneteenth? Please raise your paddle if you'd like to speak. All righty. We're going to start with Ms. Laura. Please give us your perspective.
Oh, Dr. Westbrook, I think the most important benefit of celebrating Juneteenth is to acknowledge the fact that there had to be a Juneteenth. We often do refer to Juneteenth as African American independence because the reality of the situation is that's what it was. Even while reading the Emancipation Proclamation, we saw how states did not acknowledge the Emancipation Proclamation, which is why another declaration had to be established. I think this is monumental and it's important because we are being able to let individuals that aren't aware of what Juneteenth is and the significance of it, we're letting them know that something was not right and that there was an injustice that was made and that we can put forth the effort to say we can't change the past, but we can affect the present, and we can do so positively, and we can do so with a boldness and a tenacity to let people that don't look like the people who, Juneteenth was initially for, to let them know that this is something that they can all get in on. This is not something that the information, the community, it's not something that's just limited to African American people. It's not just something that's limited to people of color, but we can all share in the wealth of knowledge, and we can all do our part to make sure that we are kept abreast of what it means, and that we can give that information to other people so that they can spread it and give it to other people, because knowledge is power. And if you don't know what's going on, you can't expect to make any other kind of different decision.
Okay, thank you. Miss Abby, I'm going to ask you a question. When was the first time you remember hearing about Juneteenth?
The first time I heard about Juneteenth was not from my family or my community, because I don't really have a big family and we don't really celebrate holidays as much, only with each other, but not holidays about others. I heard about it from the internet when I was young, and I told my family about it, and they didn't really know about it either, because I don't come from a big family, and they didn't hear about it from each other either, or from the internet, because they weren't from the internet. They were obviously old. And when I heard about it from the internet and I told my family, they were actually surprised that there was another kind of Independence Day, like 4th of July. We celebrate that with our family, but not Juneteenth. They didn't even know it was a thing, and they were kind of surprised that it was even, like, that it even existed.
Okay.
And they acknowledged it, and that's about it. We still don't, but they acknowledged it. Around the same time I did, from the internet.
Okay.
That's the way I had to find out.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. And let's see, Nefta, you want to add something?
So what stands out to me from that question are the separation of titles. And I think if we look at the separation of titles, it speaks volumes to the consistent division that we have in our country. We can't even decide on what we should label Juneteenth. Is it a second Independence Day for America, or is it African American Independence Day? So that stands out. That's one thing that stands out. But I think in recognizing whatever we come to a consensus to call it, still not technically independent and free. We've still had to add consistent amendments for basic human and civil, humane and human rights. And for me, growing up, it just hit me. My grandmother was born on June 20th, so that's the day after Juneteenth. And so obviously for my family growing up, it was like, hey, we get to celebrate twice, because it's Juneteenth and it's grandma's birthday. So a lot of times my grandmother's roots were from Louisiana. And so we were, doing fish fries. Uncle Davis is, up on a built wood platform with, all his tools to do the fish fry for everybody. And I mean, there's a lot of us. And then my grandfather, my mom's dad, was born on July 4th. So we celebrated July 4th for different reasons, because it's my grandfather's birthday. We didn't really recognize it as, America's Independence Day, but it was my grandfather's birthday. So that's why we celebrated, was grandma's birthday and Juneteenth and grandpa's birthday.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you. All right. At this time, we're going to bring forth a Menti question. And here is an opportunity for those in the audience to, with their cell phones, those at home on their computers, on their tablets or their phone, to join in with us. You will go to Menti, MENTI.com, and once you get to that website, it will ask you for a code, what we have up on the screen. That code is 71154238. And then once you have put in that code, the question will pop up on the screen. And as people start responding, we'll be able to see that. So, the question is to everyone on Menti, this quote, we've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. What are your thoughts about this quote? This quote comes from a poem from Amanda Gorman. You may recognize the name. She is one of the youngest Nobel laureates in the United States, and she wrote a poem for the inauguration of President Obama the second time. Again, what are your thoughts on the quote? We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. Please share your thoughts with us, and we will come back to this as questions start popping up on the screen. So panelists, we will come back to answers as they are appearing on our screen. But in the meantime, while our audience, both here and far away, are participating in the Menti, we're going to go on to question number 3 that Dr. Zuniga will now read.
Thank you. The discussions are really good up here. Question number 3. Though Juneteenth is a national holiday in the U.S., America, and designated on a specific day, the 19th of June, it is not uncommon to celebrate an event through the month of June. Is this a good time to discuss issues of racial injustice? We'll start with Ms. Nicole Johnson.
I think I'd like to add to what Laura said. Growing up, all the time, it's a good time to celebrate and discuss, because it's not ever going to go away if we don't talk about it and continually bring it up and put in work to make things better. You know, we didn't get the Emancipation Proclamation right the first time. That's why there is a Juneteenth. There's still freedoms that have not been reached, and I think any month is a good time to talk about it, to talk about racial injustices.
Thank you.
Ms. Victoria Garcia Rosas.
I would just like to add to what Miss Nicole said. I think that any month or any time is an important time to talk about racial injustice, but I think that June is an especially great time to talk about injustices, as Juneteenth, we're celebrating not only the beginning of freedom for many African Americans in this country, but as well as the end to slavery, and as well as to so much objectification and the struggles that Black Americans had to go through in our country, but not only in our country, but as well around the world. And I think that it's especially important to talk about it during June and kind of realize and really just discuss that topic as it comes up, and especially throughout the entire month, because it is not only one day that we are obliged or obligated to talk about these problems, but the entire month.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And Ms. Laura Coleman.
This should be discussed without there being a Juneteenth. Yeah, I'll say that Juneteenth is a great time to start to open the conversations and to talk about racial inequality and racial injustice. But the fact of the matter is that we're still dealing with it. So it should be talked about, not just because it's Juneteenth, but because it's something that is on our doorstep every time we look at the news or we read a newspaper or we walk outside. It's an active cancer right now. And usually, if you don't talk about something and you don't open the dialogue about racial inequality or racial injustice, or just wrong in general, it never goes away. If you have to be willing to be uncomfortable and have conversations that you may not want to have, or be in a hot seat that you might not even deserve to be in, because the reality is we will celebrate every other holiday throughout the month, except for Black History Month and Juneteenth. We celebrate Christmas. If you're like me, you celebrate November 30th all the way to January the 1st. We celebrate Halloween all month. We celebrate Independence Day for America all year. But when it comes to Black History Month, we get a month where no one knows our history but us, because it's not required. It's an elective. If you're lucky, you might get it in college. The fact of the matter is that these are two holidays that don't really get celebrated because there's not enough dialogue that happens, because people aren't willing to be uncomfortable to talk about why they exist to begin with. So yeah, I think that Juneteenth would be a great time to start dialogue, but the dialogue should have started before Juneteenth. And the dialogue shouldn't end with Juneteenth, and it shouldn't end with Black History Month. Because as long as our kids aren't safe and our kids are discriminated against and they're being taught, because racism is something that is taught, prejudice is taught, as long as these things are being taught on top of trying to remove history, we need to talk about it. Because if we don't, we get complacent, we don't want to rock the boat, and then we just sit in the back. And bystanders are some of the worst. So yeah, don't be a bystander. Talk about it, but don't talk about it because we're having a celebration and we're having a barbecue. Talk about it because it's wrong. Talk about it because someone's kid is out there being prosecuted. Talk about it because we've seen time and time again that we do not have justice for all. That's why it should be talked about.
Thank you. Those are very, very powerful reasons. Continue to discuss it and talk about it. Nitra Davis-Moore as well.
Sis, I heard that. That was it. There's no time like the present. And when we speak about the injustices, when I wake up, Abigail, when you wake up, we go outside, we see the world in different lenses because we've had to be raised to see the world in different lenses. And I have to raise my children, unfortunately, in 2024 to still see the world in a different lens that my ancestors before us had to see, right? Have things gotten better? Absolutely. I've still had to fight for equity, though. I still have to fight for equity for my own children, and I shouldn't have to, right? My grandparents before them, we're all fighting for the same thing, and it's literally 2024. And we're still not there. So yes, June, sure, let's talk about it. But there's 365 days of the year that I have to wake up Black and still have the same lens when I go outside. I have children who are Black who will have to have the same lens when they go outside. Their safest place is at home. When they go outside of that door, a mother's prayers are some of the strongest. A grandmother's prayers are even the strongest. And my sisters on the panel know what I mean by a mother's and grandmother's prayers, because that's why we're here today. If I did not have a praying mother and grandmother, every time I walk outside that door, sometimes I don't know if we would make it back. But just think about that. Anytime, for those of you who don't look like me, anytime you think to yourself, oh, we have to talk about this again. Why is it always about race? Ask yourself, why is it always about race? When you ask yourself that question, and look at yourself, and how are you being a part of where we need to go? Are you staying silent? Are you speaking up? Are you letting fear stop you from speaking up? The key thing that I can say for those of you who have the privilege to say it, say it. Do not be afraid to say it. Do not be afraid to be shunned. Do not be afraid in any capacity to speak up for what is right, no matter what level it is. Because I guarantee you speak up for me, I'll have your back. And I can speak to every sister on this panel, it'll be the same thing. Some of the strongest humans in this country are Black women. But some of the most mistreated humans in this country are also Black women. We show up with strength and pride, but a lot of us are bruised, damaged, beaten, and broken. When I heard the reading of the Emancipation Proclamation today, no matter how many times I hear it, it still gets me emotional and teary-eyed because we're still fighting for it. And Abraham Lincoln's is one of my favorites in history. I have all volumes of his handwritten notes that were written by his secretary. So it's going to take me years to read through these. But I'm able to see what his mind was in real time. He was a man way before his time. If he was here today, maybe we would be further. But here we are, still fighting.
Thank you, Ms. Nitra Moore. Yeah, we all should have the basic right to feel safe. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to some of the responses on Menti. And as I take a look of them, a couple of them pop up at me. Here's one that says, where was it? Silence/ignoring a part of history does not mean that injustice does not exist. There is still noise and chaos and silence and ignorance, which is a nice, very nice perspective of the words that came from Amanda Gorman's part of her speech. Do you see one, Miguel, that sticks up to you?
I do have one I think most of us are familiar with. It reminded me of the Burke quote about how evil triumphs when good men do nothing. If you don't speak out against injustices, they will.
Okay, all right. Panelists, did anybody see anything in one of the answers that popped up at them? All righty, I'm gonna start on this side. Victoria, which one did you see?
The one that you spoke about, and it says there's still noise and chaos and silence and ignorance, really spoke out to me because history continues to happen. History does not just mean the past, but the present and the future. And I think that this is a great moment that I choose to speak out, especially with what is happening in our world. Of course, we have made so much progress in the injustices that happen in our world, but there's still not justice for everyone. There's still not justice for minorities. There's still not justice for people in other countries. There's still not justice for people in Gaza and people in Palestine. In the past, just this year, 32,000 people have died, and 2.3 million people have been displaced. And for me, it is important to not stay silent during this moment, but to speak out against the massacre that is happening. And I want everybody else to also just be aware of what is happening in the world. And I just wanted to take this moment to give back to those people.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Laura?
I think that this quote is very interesting. One of the responses that stuck out to me was that it says, not everyone's voices are being heard and complacency is hard to avoid sometimes. And that is the important factor, complacency, justice. We always talk about justice, justice, justice. And then you have to ask yourself, what is the standard of justice? Who is creating the standard? I'm very thankful for my man of God because he said something that really struck a chord with me. As long as we will continue to place the moral compass and the moral standard and the bar for morality on flawed humanity, we will always be at a deficit. Because I believe that God is the one who shows me what justice looks like. And so when we have imperfect beings trying to create a moral compass, you can't help but get flawed. You can't help but get it flawed. I mean, if you think about it, it's the irony that our Constitution, we literally say the Pledge of Allegiance, we've read the Constitution, and we see how much it's about, well, this is for liberty and justice for all, but it's the hypocrisy as you're writing this knowing that everyone is not free. Some of us would have been considered 3/5 of a person. And it wouldn't have been because we were of importance, it's because we were property. And so it makes you wonder if our founding fathers were the ones telling us or creating or helping to, I guess, they were helping to give us the template or the rough draft of what justice and freedom is supposed to look like, while having slaves of their own, while actively oppressing people of color. What kind of justice are we really looking at? What kind of justice are we talking about? Silence does not equate to peace. Volcanoes erupt, and you don't know that they erupt because they've been boiling under the surface. When African Americans started the civil rights movement and their protest became what people would call as more radicalized, what really happened was they got tired of being quiet. They got tired of being complacent. They got tired of waiting and asking and hoping that things were going to change. My Bible says that faith without works is dead. So if you want to see the works, you have to show your faith through your works. So they started marching. They started boycotting. They started protesting. They started looking out for one another. No, they weren't perfect, but silence breeds action, and usually it also breeds irritation, because I don't know if you guys ever had something where it's like, we live in a very quiet society, we don't like to confront people, very non-confrontational, and that irritation builds up, and then you see people exploding on people when the crime doesn't fit the punishment. It's because they've let it boil over. So the best thing that we can do in the silence is start asking, why is it so quiet? What is really happening? Because when people are quiet, when my mom stops talking to me, it's because she's tired of me. It's because I'm about to get in trouble. It's because I'm about to lose my life. And so let's start asking ourselves that, like, why are things quiet? We know inequality is happening, so why is it so quiet?
Okay, thank you. Netra?
To piggyback on you, Laura, when I read the quote, I was thinking to myself when I first read that, when you see, especially a sister girl like me, quiet, it's me trying to hold my peace. And it doesn't mean that I am a quiet person, because those that know me know I'm not by any means. But it's either because I'm about to go off or I am stopping myself from going off. So when I read that quote, that's what I related to, was I'm quiet because I'm I'm trying to self-contain and control. Otherwise, it might explode. So as you're out there, and if you work among those that look like me again, be mindful when we are quiet and recognize that there might be some buildup there. Like Laura said, because absolutely. Sometimes you get to a point where enough is absolutely enough.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Since we had a little discussion, we have another mentee question. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Miss Abigail. Yeah, which one?
The first one, it says, being quiet often upholds the status quo, and the status quo is often in favor of the oppressors or those in power.
Interesting.
I connected to that because if you're not speaking out, you are obviously helping the oppressor because they want you to stay silent. And I connect to that because as a Christian, you're supposed to, this is a connection I can make. I'm supposed to spread the word of God. Like, I'm supposed to have faith, and I'm supposed to tell others, this happened, and we need to do this. And more in the Bible, this happened, and that means so-and-so. Well, if I don't spread the faith, that means that the oppressor, the devil, is winning. And obviously, I know that I'm not a good Christian, and I don't speak out like I should, but that's the same thing about injustice. I'm not speaking out like I should, and I know I'm helping the oppressor, which is higher ups. They want us to stay silent. The devil, he wants me to be silent, and I let them win because they're in power, and I might have fear, and I'm letting them win because I stay quiet, and obviously I know better because I have a voice, and I can tell like whatever I have to tell to spread the faith, but I don't, but I can. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's a good insight. Thank you very much. All right. What I want to do is I want to go to the next panel question. And after the panel question, we're going to come back to the mentee question number 2. So with that said, panel question number 4. Can you be honest about a time when you questioned someone's ability or your ability was questioned by someone based on skin color? Again, I'll repeat that question. Can you be honest about a time when you questioned someone's ability based on skin color or your ability was questioned based on skin color? So I'm seeing paddles. We have Nicole, and we have Abby, and we have Nitra. All right. Nicole, share with us, please.
I'm not saying that there was never a time that I questioned someone's ability, but I can't think of one. But I know that my ability definitely is questioned at work. I am a nurse manager at the hospital that I work at, and patients will question my ability. Like, I supervise. I'm a nurse manager of the house supervisor, so I supervise the campus. So if a decision has to be made, and they come to me, and a patient would question my authority and want to speak to someone above me, and I'm like, well, I'm it. Like, I'm here to help you bring resolution to this problem. So I know that definitely happens all the time at work, in healthcare.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Abby?
So I know also, same as Nicole, that I have questioned someone's ability, but I can't think of it. And my ability also has been questioned, but I can't think of it. But I can say that when I heard the question, I just thought that this wasn't related, but everyone has an equal ability. Like, people have told me, Abby, you have the same ability as this person, or this person, you have the same ability as Abby and this person, because skin color is just perceptive and it's just a concept. But that same person questions another person's ability. Like, they tell me, Abby, do you see that person is because this and this? And I can't think of anything specific, but it's like hypocrisy is shown because that person, they're telling me one thing and they're doing the opposite, or they're saying the opposite, and obviously skin color is like, I don't know, it really doesn't matter. Like, I'm not going to judge you based on your hair color, but skin color being judged is so not popular, but it's a thing. I don't know why it's a thing, and people know why is it a thing, because that person said, oh, well, why, Abby? Why do you think why do you think it matters? And I'm like, it really doesn't, but also the way it doesn't makes it matter. I don't really know how to explain it, but yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how to explain it, but.
No, I get you. And you know what? Let me add that how old are you, 17 years old?
15.
15. Okay, there we go. What a great perspective from a young person. I don't know why that exists, is what she's saying. And I can't figure out why that exists, but nobody can explain it to me either. But I know it's there. That's what I just got out of what you just said, out of all of that. So is that what you were saying for the most part?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I don't know why it's a thing, and they'll agree with me, but then they'll tell me why. Like,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
hearing two different things from one
we're with
person.
you, sister. We're with you. What is going on? I don't understand why this is a thing, but I know it's a thing. And will somebody explain to me? That's from the mouths of babes. Right there is where that came from. So I bet there's 15 to 17, 18-year-old all over asking that exact same question. Why is this a problem? Because I don't understand why it is, but nobody can explain it to me either. So I get you. All right, Ms. Davis-Moore?
So 2 parts on this question. Have I questioned someone's ability? Absolutely, because I do find myself questioning someone's ability based on how they receive me, if that makes sense. Does this person have the ability to see me for me? Or does this person have the ability to see me for being sometimes a well-dressed, articulate, educated Black woman, right? So in that question, I do find myself questioning someone's ability. Have I been questioned on my ability? And I jokingly read this question and thought to myself, I don't know if there's enough hands in the rooms on the number of times my ability has been questioned. I can think of a time that typically boils my water when I, still to this day, it's been several years, but similar situation at work, typical meeting, going through, your regular agenda items, a question comes up in relation to policy, and if there's one thing that my mother taught me in any professional aspect you're in, is your policy. Your policy is your protection. So anywhere I've been, I've always made sure to know policy. And so when the question arises, I answer the question based on policy. And lo and behold, in the meeting, a woman who does not look like me and is a fair shade is like, well, I think we need to call and verify. Well, okay then. Proceeds to get on the phone during the meeting to call. And during that call, the other woman on the other end, who I know and still have mad respect for to this day, and she has mad respect for me to this day, simply replied, well, Nitra is right. And the woman who had to insist on calling was like, oh, I'm so sorry. You were right. And I simply looked at her and said, I know. And then we moved on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Laura Coleman.
I actually I never experienced discrimination until I came to Texas. And that's ironic because I came from Jackson, Mississippi. Just throwing that into context. I have had to fight to get my degree 2 times. I have been discriminated. There's nothing, being a woman is hard. Being a black woman in academia is so much harder because you really see the racial divide in education, but I don't have to tell y'all that. I have had to report professors for changing grades, for failing me, even though I have documentation that I passed, for adding on extra classes because they conveniently forgot that I needed this prerequisite. And most currently, when I was finishing up my master's degree, my thesis chair dropped out of my thesis at the last minute because she was too busy, even though I had asked her months prior, after I had did research, after I had did the literature reviews, and my master's degree is in exercise sports science. And I had class with this individual. I was the only black woman in the class. Knew all the answers, or studied, read up. No one knew what to say. I always have something to say because I'm a nerd. And you could see that she was so irritated with my presence that even my co-parts, my colleagues were like, why is she so mean to you? She doesn't treat him that way. She doesn't treat her that way. Why is she so mean? I chalk it up to the game. I'm like, this is not my first rodeo. Okay, I am true to this, not new to this. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna graduate anyway, and I'm gonna get an A in your class, and I'm gonna leave. And then she tried to keep me from graduating. Now, I'm going to try to give her the benefit of the doubt because the Lord is working on my sanctification. But the reality is I worked hard. 7 years. It took me 7 years to complete both. After I was told by my teachers that I was not good enough. And so she proceeded to tell me that I could not get a class, that I needed to graduate, the only class I needed to graduate, because there were no more available slots, even though she had the power to make an exception if she wanted to. And then I found out from a friend of mine, because I got eyes everywhere, that in the same breath that she told me the class wasn't available and I had to wait, she opened up a slot for a white student. And I just thought, wow, again? For just being educated and black, I suppose. And so I went and I reported her, and she still has her job. They made a concession for me. They put me in a different class, and I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the people that I worked with to fight on my behalf, that I was able to graduate. And there was nothing greater than watching her watch me get my hood. But it still made me wonder, there are so many other people like that. And I wish I could say it stopped in academia. I've been stopped by the police. I've been accused of drinking and driving while just walking. Walking while black is a real thing. Walking to my apartment and an officer says, hey, I saw somebody that looked like you driving a car and drinking. Now it's Halloween and I'm dressed as a clown, so I'm thinking, are you talking about you've seen another clown or just a black clown? And he was like, my white roommate had to tell him, not only did I live at the apartment that she didn't live at, but that I wasn't drinking or driving. I was simply walking to my apartment. I've been stopped by the police officers in New Braunfels and harassed and accused of breaking and entering while taking pictures for a friend that's a photographer on a public sidewalk in boots and a jean skirt. I don't know what fence I was going to hop in that. And then only for them to then say, oh, sorry, smile, and drive off.
Okay.
It's crazy. And my father is in law enforcement, and I never had an issue or a qualm about law enforcement ever until I came to Texas.
All right. Thank you, ma'am, for sharing that with us. All right. We're going to kind of continue with the same topic. Dr. Zuniga is going to share a Menti question with our audience.
Yes, our second Menti question is, we have recently observed the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa Massacre, the insurrection in the U.S. Capitol, and have seen many other acts of violence. Have these events changed your perception of America? How can we avoid being desensitized to violence? They use the same code? Okay.
Yep,
So-
you can, that same code to our audience that are watching here and afar. Again, it's menti.com, and then the code is 71154238. So if you're in the system, basically the new question will pop up on whatever device you're using. And if you didn't answer a previous question, then once you get into Menti and you use this code, you will see the new question that has popped up. So while we are waiting on responses from our audience near and afar, we're going to go to our next panel question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Westwick. Panel question number 5. Why do you think a continued dialogue about Juneteenth and its history is important? I'll start with Victoria Garcia Rosas.
I just want to say, what was it, Miss Laura?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you kind of answered this question previously when we talked about how Juneteenth is not the only time to talk about racial injustice, and you answered that beautifully, and why we need to have a continued dialogue of not just Juneteenth, but the racial injustices that African Americans face. And I think that Juneteenth and its history is so important because it has us realize that, personally to me, I come from a family of immigrants, and there has always been the stigma of the American dream. Since America was first established, since the first people that, quote unquote, discovered America came, this American dream. But the reality is that the American dream has not been the American dream for millions of people, for minorities. And the reality is that it was the American dream for those that it benefited. And, people of color, and especially African Americans, got the lower stick part of it and faced such horrible injustices. And I think that it's important to continue talking about this history because it will never, ever go away. We can never go back in time, and an apology is never, ever going to be enough. But to continue to be aware, to continue to just know and to do better is such a progress, I want to say, and that it is so hurtful to be ignorant and to turn a blind eye to these kinds of, the ugly part of our history. And especially to all of those that it happened to. So I think it's just important to continue to be educated, to continue to educate our future generations about what happened, and that and unfortunately did happen. Unfortunately, people died. Unfortunately, people were enslaved. Unfortunately, all of this happened. And I think that it's important to continue talking about it because, as I mentioned before, it will never, ever go away.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Nicole Johnson?
I think continued dialogue about Juneteenth is important because, I mean, independence has not totally been achieved. If we just think about today, in Texas, they're getting rid of DUI in higher education, of diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher education, where it's important. To talk about what Ms. Laura said about being pulled over by the police, I have 2 black sons that grew up in Hayes County, Texas. And having to teach them, like one is about to start driving, about driving while black, or being in Kyle, Texas while black, or, you know, just that he goes to Lehman High School. And if you know anything about Kyle, Texas, Lehman High School is way down here compared to Johnson and Hayes High School. But, you know, if you talk to me pre-children and post-children, trying to maintain a status quo or being silenced, I know I hover on what is really important and what's safe for my kids and to make sure that they're okay. Like, because I have one who now is playing football in Mississippi, but one still lives right here in Kyle. So I sit here and look at who's here today. This is the city of Kyle, and I so appreciate you, Dr. Zuniga, for being here, but it would have been nice for other council members for the city of Kyle to have been present today at this celebration. The things that are going on right now is why it's so important to continue talking about Juneteenth in our community.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Nitra?
Simple answer on this one. For me, it's needed because lies are still being told. And those very same lies are being believed. And we have a lot of various perceptions, I think based on a variety of probably different reasons and versions of stories that have been told within their families. I think when we talk about the idea of the slave trade, it does make people very, very uncomfortable. And I, for one, personally don't care about comfort in speaking of the terms of slavery. Because when I think about the blessings that have happened just most recently, my son and my parents are in Ghana right now. But we can't say if that's where we originated from. And I told my son, and I've told my parents, the one thing that I want you to do when y'all are traveling, try to connect and feel our ancestors. Stand one time at least barefoot in the dirt, because they're there. Connect. Because I know once they come back, they're gonna come back in a different way, especially my 10-year-old, who we are raising right here in Hayes County. And it's something I think about daily as he gets older. He'll feed into Barton and into Hayes. I don't know what that's going to look like in years to come as we see the growth of Kyle. And I do agree. It would have been nice. Thank you, Dr. Zuniga, for making an appearance, because it speaks volumes to what's important to Kyle. When my son was very young and living in Kyle, he had an experience from one of our leaderships in Kyle that has made me look at him in a different way, and forever will make me look at him in a different way. And my son was only 3 years old when this happened. So, again, to see Only one. Dr. Zuniga, again, thank you. It speaks volumes to the issues we still have and why it is important, not just to talk about Juneteenth, but to talk about the continued injustice and what is driving America and its division. Division and racism is what's feeding the greed. Think about that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Was there anybody else on this? Okay.
Okay.
Ms. Coleman?
I will just say that I think every woman that spoke really, really brought it home, because the fact of the matter is that, like they said, as long as history, if we consider ourselves American, then Black history is American history. As long as we continue to allow people to tell us that we are separate, we will never come together. As long as we are willing to watch as a piece of American history, because it's not the nicest to look at, is washed away, we'll never get better. Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Time and time again, we see that history that is not learned from repeats itself. There is nothing new under the sun. So rather than doing the same thing and expecting a different result like crazy people, let's have uncomfortable conversations. I agree. I would have liked to see the other council members here as well. And I'm grateful to be able to speak with you and to just have this conversation, because as we can see, it's a conversation that a lot of people are not willing to have. I just think it's ironic because it's easy to have conversations when they benefit us. It takes a true show of character to have conversations that may make you uncomfortable, that may make you scratch your head and wonder, why did I think that way? Why did I do that? Or how could I be better? We always promote growth. The best thing about history is that you can learn from it. But if you erase it, you're forced to repeat it because you have no way of learning. And I would just like to believe that because we want to learn and we want to do better, and I truly believe in my heart that we want to promote open discussion and open conversations like this, we have to talk about it because it'll just fade into the background. We live in 2024. People are getting canceled right and left and then forgotten, and things have clout for a minute and then it disappears. Once the excitement wears off, it's like it never happened. And we can't do that with our history because Black history is American history, so we should start treating it as American history.
Thank you, ma'am. All righty. We'll take a look at just one or two of the answers from Menti.com. Most of I think for the most part, it looks like the answers kind of focus on the desensitized to violence. One of our viewers said, it's truly hard not to be desensitized to violence when it's there every single time I open my phone. But staying informed is a tool. Great point. The idea that you see so much of it that it's like, oh, well, it happened again. But then if you don't pay attention to what's going on, then you're out of the loop. You're not seeing what's happening. And, so it's like an and or R type thing, if you think about it, for the most part. Another one said, we are only desensitized to the things that we feel that cannot happen to us. The simple difference between the attack on the Capitol versus an innocent life lost due to discrimination only solidifies reality. Interesting component. So someone else says, I never knew about the Tulsa massacres. The comment I have to make about that is when I first heard about the Tulsa massacres, it was referred to as a race war, the Tulsa race war. And I said, race war? No. There was only one person fighting. The other side was getting killed. So that's not a war in my eyes, in reference to what a war is. So I thought that was interesting when I heard that, but I thought to stop hearing the word race war, Tulsa race war, and more of the Tulsa massacre, because you have one group of people being completely killed and murdered by another group of people, and the group that were the victims had no way to defend themselves during the time that it happened, who was involved, etc. So anyway, I do hope that, and Laura, you said something I thought was important, is that when we don't talk about in my eyes, the good, the bad, and the ugly in history, it can repeat itself. Because, I didn't know this is the first time that's ever happened. You know, one of the best quotes I ever heard was from Colin Powell. He's one of my favorite guys. And when the Twin Towers had been attacked in 9/11, someone made a comment, I cannot believe that we've had our first terrorist act in the United States. And Colin Powell said, pardon? This is not the first time we've had terrorist acts in the United States, because during the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, black people in the South were being terrorized by groups who were lynching them. That is terrorizing. So this is not the first time it's happened. It's just the first time that you now know about it, or you have made a connection to it. So I was like, wow, I never thought about it from that point, but what a great perspective analogy to give in that one. So anyway, continue answering those questions for us. We do appreciate it. We're going to go to question number 6. We're about ready to wind it down. What'd I say, Rachel? It's about 8:15? Huh? Do number 7. You do it then. Do number 7.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to number 7. Number 6 was related to 5. What are the biggest challenges we still face in our society related to racial justice, and how can we help our children to understand, respect, and aim for a more equitable society? To almost everyone. Okay, Ms. Victoria Garcia Rosas, you can lead it off.
Yes. So the part of that question that most resounded with me was, how can we help our children to understand, respect, and aim for a more equitable society? For me, something that's really important is that there is power in knowledge. I am somebody who, I love education. That's what I aspire to be, a teacher. And I think that it starts at the bottom. I think it starts from how we teach our children in school, that as we are born, we know nothing. We are simply people whose minds are to be molded, and we learn our behavior, we learn everything. And so hateful behaviors are taught, racial injustice is taught, racism is taught. It is not something that we are simply born with. It is not a mindset that we are born with. And I think that it starts at the bottom. It starts with the way that we educate our children, not only at home, not only in our communities, but in our schools. History is something that I have seen and I've learned through school has been very censored. You know, our history books are not our history. Our history books have been compiled to put out the pretty parts of history, to put it out as a more gentle version of our history, but it is not true. And if we don't have those parts of history, it is not truly, like Ms. Laura said, American history. And so I believe that through education, through our schools, especially with books, I think that books are one of the most powerful things that we can teach to our children. I had the honor of, for the Black History Month celebration, of reading a book called That Flag. And books like those resound with me because they are so important. They are such a valuable way of us to teach our students about the ugly parts of history, the parts that are not polished and put in the history books that are pushed out to us that we are taught. But they are a great way to teach our children that this is what happened, and these are the things that people face in our community, and also this is the way that we should treat people, that we should treat people with love, with peace, without a mindset of hatefulness and racism. So I think that that's one of the most important things that we can do for our children, that we can do as a generation to progress.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Ms. Nicole Johnson.
Off what Ms. Victoria said, knowledge is power, but power is also in numbers. I think, I would love to see this room filled next year. There needs to be more people like me, and people in this room are the ones that are making, amongst the ones who are decision makers, not just in our community, but on a larger scale. We spend a lot of our time worrying about who you're going to vote for president. We need to bring it down. Let's work on the city council. Let's go to the state, the government, getting people more involved. And I know I'm happy that my son has become more involved these last 2 years. And, like I said, the community that we live in, he goes to Lehman High School, and Lehman High School has auto mechanics, vet tech, cosmetology, but you can go to Johnson High School and get aerospace, science, and whatever. Just him noticing that inequality is right where he lives, and it happens. Johnson High School just came about. That was planned. It was thoughtful. We have pink and green and yellow low-income housing on our side of the highway where Lehman High School is, and countless number of fast food restaurants. But on the other side of the highway, look at the restaurants, look at the schools that they're building. I promise you Lehman High School is not going to get a brand new football stadium. I promise you it'll go to Johnson High School. Just the things that you're doing right in these few miles that we live in. We need to get more people, be powerful in numbers, or be amongst those people that are making decisions that are important for, my kid's about to graduate next year, but maybe for the next, we have a 15-year-old, and it's maybe for the next generation of kids. And I love Lehman High School. We are Lobos. I'm not talking down Lehman High School. I would have never transferred my kids from Lehman, and always encouraged them, even when they were asked, because people will tell you that transfer is not real. They don't transfer, they don't recruit. That happens in Hays County, because my kid was recruited to every single school, but he stayed true to being a Lobo.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, very important, knowledge and representation for your community, for sure. Who's next? Nitra, did you have?
So I've got, as far as some of the challenges, the biggest challenges I think we face, racism, division, greed, and the constant fight for equity. You just describing the differences on between 35, there it is, the fight for equity. And also, too, how can we help our children understand? I'll say this simply. If my grandparents went through it, your grandbabies can learn about it. And how do we aim for the respect? Respect what we're saying. It's that simple. Respect what we're saying. Don't minimize it. Don't diminish it. Listen. It's very easy to listen. Very easy to listen. And how to aim for more equability. I'm going to say one phrase, and if you don't know where this phrase was coined from, I want you to go look for it. Good trouble.
Ms. Coleman, did you want to speak on this?
Yes. To put it simply, we gotta love each other. Love. All of these things stem from a lack of love. Jesus said that there is no greater love than this, than a man that will lay his life down for his brother. What would our society look like if we knew how to show the love of Jesus? Be compassionate. Because at the end of the day, the only one that's dividing us is us. God doesn't see race. God doesn't see this. He doesn't see race. He sees you as his own. So the moment that we realize that and we start treating people the way that God treats us, with the same kind of mercy that we don't deserve, with the same kind of benefit of the doubt that we don't deserve, then we can be compassionate, because it's really easy to throw stones when you forget that you live in a glass house. And if anything that has happened, 2024 has shown that people live in glass houses. And social media is really good at exposing people's hands. Love each other. I don't want to see someone going through something, it doesn't matter what color I am. If I got food, you got food. If you need somewhere to stay, I have a couch. If you need help with reading or writing, I'll meet you at 6 o'clock. Well, let's tutor. If you need somebody to pray for you, I'll do that. If you need somebody to vent to, I'll be an ear. If you need someone to stand up for you, I'm right behind you. Because at the end of the day, until we learn to love one another, none of these conversations are going to matter. Because it's a heart issue. It's not a racial issue. It's not a political issue. It's a hate issue.
Thank you. Let me add to this question. I have a question for Abigail. Abigail, when you hear the word respect, what does that mean to you?
To put it simply, I just think respect is earned. Everyone has respect for one another, but it's the same thing applies to disrespect. And once you apply the disrespect, obviously you lose my respect for you. That's just me personally. I automatically respect you, but you don't automatically respect me? Okay, same thing. I just think that it's bare minimum until it isn't, and then you have to earn it, and it shouldn't have to be that way in the first place.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask the same question to Victoria. When you hear the word respect, what do you think about that?
I think respect is, like Abby said, the bare minimum. I think that what else can we offer to people? When you first meet somebody, the first thing that you can offer somebody is respect. Respect for who they are, respect for their time. So it's very confusing to me when these, people aren't respected simply because of the color of their skin. Why do you think that's something that you would usually give the bare minimum to anybody else, are you now taking away from somebody simply because of the color of their skin? It is not hard to give respect. It is not hard to give love. It is something that is very simple. So why is it that others have a hard time giving that simply because of that? It doesn't cost anything to give respect to others.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Nitra had just raised her paddle.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to, before we close, I want to recognize, because there was a question that came up about the Tulsa massacre, and I wanted to recognize that the Oklahoma Supreme Court dismissed the Tulsa massacre lawsuit that was filed in 2020. And I just want to recognize the last two survivors that were there to see that dismissal. Leslie Benningfield Randall, who was 109 years old, Viola Ford Fletcher, who's 110 years old. And in 2023, just last year, Hugh Van Ellis, who is the youngest brother of Miss Fletcher, he passed away at 102 years old. So we just celebrated that 100th anniversary, and if you do the math for them, 109, 110, and 102, that's why we're still fighting.
Boy,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
And Ms. Abigail just raised her paddle.
Because I actually saw a response that I wanted to comment on.
Please share.
Well, sorry. Can I see the quote or the responses again? Okay. The quote on the right says, "I'm learning as I get older that much of American history is whitewashed and mythologized. We must teach and learn truthful, accurate history if we want to achieve peace and progress." So a couple other quotes or a couple other responses of the quote say that they didn't know about the quote or the Tulsa Massacre until, like, they didn't learn it in school. And that reminded me, I don't know what it is either, because I got the email a couple days ago. Here are the questions that are going to be asked. I was reading them, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to lie, I didn't know what it is either. I obviously haven't finished school yet, but if they aren't going to learn it, if they hadn't learned about it in school, I'm probably not going to either. So I started to do research on it, and I read that the white people killed 300 plus African Americans, and then the black community was blamed. And the way that's not taught in school, you can clearly, like, that's on purpose. And it's obviously on purpose. And that reminded me of, like, how Native Americans were stolen their land. And you don't learn about that in school, you just learn about how the land was found, not that the natives were there before. So there's a pattern of stuff that isn't taught in school, including the Tulsa Massacre, which is based around the black community, or the Native Americans getting stolen their land, which is based around the Native American community. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Thanks for that summary. That was a good summary, and actually a very good analogy also of the idea of how parts of history are not where they should be. And you may or may not know about it unless somebody brings it forth. And I appreciate your honesty about, I didn't know what that was. I had to look that up. And, oh, and wait a minute, that kind of sounds like something that I did hear about, but I didn't hear a whole lot about that either. So very, very good point to make, Miss Abby. Girl, you're going to go places, let me tell you.
One thing,
One last thing.
I just want to give you something, Abby. I want you to see the good side of what was before that massacre, and I want you to go look up Black Wall Street.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we are coming to an end. Every year that I do this, it's always amazing to me on how we will engage in conversations and you look up and say, uh-oh, it's time. Because the conversation could continue even more. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Peace and Progress, that was started by former council member Dex Ellison, began in the first place, is to have these conversations. And I remember that very first one, I was on the panel. And at the very, very end, the question came up as, should this happen again? And overwhelmingly, it was, yes, we should continue to have these kinds of conversations. And I want to say that I so appreciate Councilmember Zuniga, my colleague, for being here with us. He's actually sponsoring this event, and how he, jumped to the chance to say, yes, I represent all the citizens here in Kyle, and let's have this conversation that we've been having for several years now. And he's here. Is there anybody else here that's from City Council?
I think they were on a trip.
Oh, okay. Oh, so, all right. So anyway, thank you so much, Councilmember Zuniga, for being here with us and engaging conversations. I don't know if you guys those of you who have participated or seen the Peace and Progress Juneteenth have noticed that we try to bring new faces to this dais every time we do it. Another set of people, not the same old people, but different people. We try and do generational, and this is our first time doing an all-female squad, girl power. But the idea is that these are open for our citizens to participate in. And there'll be another one coming up this fiscal year also. You can always go and sign up and say, I want to be on the panel. And here's the important thing. If it's Black History, if it's Juneteenth, if it's Hispanic Heritage, these panels are not limited to a group of people. It's open to the community because you have a perspective. And all of these celebrations, when we talk about celebrating Black History Month, celebrating Juneteenth, happy Juneteenth, everybody, celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, it is not about that one group. It is about the community as a whole, talking about and providing a perspective. Because I believe one thing that I heard from every panelist today was how you have a voice, use it, and talk about things that are near and dear to your heart. So thank you, Councilmember Zuniga, for allowing us to participate in this yet another year.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you, Vanessa Westbrook, Dr. Westbrook, for being my co-moderator. I'd like to thank the panelists for sharing their stories and giving us a good window to see your experiences and how you use that voice to continue these social change things. And also City of Kyle for having and all the viewers and our audience here as well.
Yep. A big shout out to the communications team.
Yes.
They are fabulous.
Thank you, Rachel.
And Rachel and the rest of the crew, they are the force behind making sure that the microphones are working, you get to see the panelists, you're able to engage whether you're at home in your jammies or you're sitting here with us tonight. Thank you so much. We had a pre-event this year for this particular event, and we had the Lehman High School Choir to participate, to provide us with some songs that were very entertaining.
Yeah.
We also had a young man, a Michael Jackson impersonator, who just graduated from Lehman High School, and his name was
Michael MJ?
Michael MJ, Michael Matt.
Michael Matt.
I think Matt.
Talented
Yeah,
guy.
very talented guy who's going to be on his way to New York to pursue the idea of going into music and et cetera. So anyway, I think we're at a time when we can go ahead and close for the evening. Again, thank you, ladies, for participating and sharing your thoughts with us. And we'll look forward to the next Peace and Progress Community Dialogue. I want to say that again, Community Dialogue that's open for you to come in and address and provide your perspective on the given topic. So thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Happy Juneteenth.
Thank you. Great job, Vanessa.
All right, good job, Miguel.
Good job, Vanessa.